Well, hello, everybody. Welcome back. This week, I have Neil with us. I'm super excited to have him come here and share some particular gems with us. And I'm really excited and interested in sharing with you who he is, what he does, and what he's all about, and where he's going. So, Neil, a big warm welcome from me and our audience. Welcome to the Tony Shap Show.
Thank you, Tony. I'm happy to be here. So, as you said, I'm Neil Tyra. I am by day an estate planning attorney in Maryland, trusts, wills, and the like, which gets a lot of business these days in the pandemic because people are always concerned about that. But by night, my superhero character is I have a podcast myself called The Law Entrepreneur, and it addresses the question what they didn't teach us about running a law practice in law school. So we have a lot of entrepreneurs on the show and gadget folks, people who have a product or service to sell to attorneys. And I help young attorneys who are starting out in a solo practice or transitioning to a solo practice. I help them build their businesses.
Beautiful. And tell us your one word open. I always have this famous question I ask, one word open. So, what is a one word open that you could say right now to describe how you're feeling this exact moment, Neil?
At this moment, the one word it would be excited.
Awesome. Love it. All right, let's go into your wins. Tell our audience about a recent win that you had that you've personally experienced and what you learned from it at a high level. That would be great.
Yeah, well, a recent when I circled back to a previous guest that I had on the podcast, and he's an author. His name is David Barkus, and he wrote a book called "Friend of a Friend," and he's now written two more books. But for this podcast, I would have never been able to approach a an author of his stature to interview and to extract whatever value and information we could. And so going back, what I've since learned is he's a huge fan of the podcast, even still having been on it over a year and a half ago, and wants to come back on. So it's a big win for me to reconnect with a really celebrated author, David Burkus. Really, if you haven't read that book, Friend of a Friend, it's about the science behind networking. So if you're an entrepreneur and you're trying to build your business through networking or network marketing, you have to read this book because it's the underlying science behind why networking works.
Great. Thanks for sharing that with us. Let's talk about the complete other side of that. What's a recent failure that you've experienced and what you learned from it?
Well, it's not so much a failure is it's a result of a decision that I made that, in hindsight, is kind of challenging. When I started my estate planning practice, now this dovetails with the podcast. When I started my estate planning practice, I purposely targeted my clients to be those who are middle class or lower middle class, simpler estates, ones that we could generate more easily, which was great pre-pandemic.
Hmm.
After the pandemic, those are the folks that are really uh, dealing with challenges about paying their mortgage, putting food on the table, educating their kids. So they don't have time to worry about doing an estate plan. So, from an entrepreneurial perspective, I think the failure to note there is making a marketing decision about your target audience that might not have the flexibility that's necessary to adapt to changing conditions.
Got it. Got it. Um, Tell our audience what is your your favorite online tool that you use for business today.
I think the tool that I use the most is Canva, canva.com. It's a web-based platform for doing um, design work. Now I'm a techie by heart. I mean, I was a tech nerd before I became an attorney. So doing my own graphics is something that I like to do. So graphics for the podcast, graphics for the law firm, PDFs, Facebook screen posts. All of that I do in Canva. It's a free online tool. It's very robust. It's easy to learn. It has a lot of intelligence built into it. So it does a lot of things for you that you would have otherwise had to have managed on your own if you had a standalone application. Now the web-based application does that for you. So really valuable tool. And if you use Canva to generate some graphics for your business, you'll find that there's a huge universe of people who can help you with that and expand upon it. So if you wanted to hire, say, a virtual assistant to take that Canva product and make it even better, it's easy to do. It's easy to find it. So it's not an obscure platform. It's very widely known.
Excellent. Now, if you were in my shoes, what's one question that I should ask you, or what's the one question that you wish people would ask you, Neil, that they typically never ask?
Why did you start the podcast in the first place?
I like it.
So the answer to that question is I started it to get free advice. I figured, I had coaching and I wasn't entirely happy with the coaching that I was getting. And so I've always enjoyed podcasts. I figured if I started a podcast and interviewed smart people, that some of it might rub off and I might get smarter as a result. And I thought, well, if I could do that for 3 to 6 months, that's a great project. I would have learned a few things and it'd be worth my time and effort. What I didn't realize is that there was a huge market for exactly the question I was asking. And we're now almost 5 years later, 260 some odd episodes, weekly episodes, and still going strong, still growing. So I started it to get free advice and it's grown into its own, entity.
That's really wonderful. And sadly, as we're coming to an end here, let our listeners know how we could get a hold of you, how they could follow up with you, or how they could get in touch with you, and in case they have any questions about this conversation, or how they can find your podcast, all that good stuff.
Great. Well, you can find the podcast anywhere you get your podcast, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. We're on all the different platforms. Just search for The Law Entrepreneur. Now, the hardest part there is learning how to spell entrepreneur, but I'm assuming that your audience will be able to overcome that. So search on Law Entrepreneur. And the same thing in terms of how to reach me. You can reach me at Neil, Neil, at thelawentrepreneur.com. So Neil at thelawentrepreneur.com. That's also the name of our website, thelawentrepreneur.com. So you can listen to our podcast there and check out some other resources that we have. And I'm on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram and all those things. So just search for The Law Entrepreneur.
Perfect. And then the last famous question, what's the one word close as we're wrapping it up?
Faith.
Perfect. Well, there you have it, folks. Neil, thank you very much again for your time. Thanks for being a guest on our podcast, and you've given some great value about what you're all about and how you got started and what your podcast is all about. So I'm super excited for people to reach out to you and to find out more about what you do. And there's a lot of people that you could help. So once again, thanks again for being a guest. And until next time.
My pleasure, Tony. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Take care.